This is Ray Mooney's Wild World of Wet Shaving. Let's begin. Hey, this is Ray Mooney. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm thrilled and delighted to welcome Dennis from Spearhead Shaving to the show. Welcome, Dennis.
Your timing is impeccable because I just got a new computer, I got a new microphone, and I set it all up, and it's like, okay, now what? And then you sent me a message saying, hey, you want to do a podcast? And it's like, now I get to see if any of this stuff actually works. So if this gets
Perfect.
published, it does all work indeed.
Let's hope it does. Very excited to speak to you today and happy to, field test or test drive your equipment for you. So we can jump right into it. The first question I have for you is, were you involved in the wet shaving community before you started Spearhead?
Before I answer that, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Because when I got started, I know your podcast is relatively new.
It's
And what is this, the fourth or fifth episode?
it's the fifth episode. You're the fourth guest. The first was just me.
Okay. So when I got started and people would find out what I was doing, I didn't tell people about it, but my wife would mention something like, yeah, my husband's making soap in the garage. And people would ask like, why? And if you read between the lines, a lot of times what they were saying is, why are you doing something that has very low potential to blow up and get big? Right? It's a very niche, small community.
Oh, it sure
And
is.
and people would look at it like, I don't think P&G is going to buy you. So why are you spending your time doing this? And I know why I was doing it, which is maybe not what they expected, but I'm kind of wondering the same thing about you. Why spend your time doing a podcast for something that's so specialized?
It's a pleasure because I enjoy it because I think other people enjoy it too. It's for me at least, I dove headlong into this hobby during the pandemic, actually, is when I became really involved with it. I found this group on Reddit, the Our Wet Shaver Gang, and, got deep into it. And of course, it's very, very niche, but I've met so many interesting people and have been having such a great time as part of this community that I wanted to do a podcast and talk about it and try to, speak to people who I've met along the way because everyone has a more interesting story to tell than just, wet shaving, often the case. So far, so good. But yes, not for gain, and I have no, hopes of Sirius XM picking up my show or anything like that.
But if it does, you'll ride the wave.
Oh, I'll ride the wave, all right, of course, and I'll bring shaving to the masses. I think it seems to me like it's men's grooming in any case is trending these days or is on the up and up. This maybe is just part of that bigger universe.
Yeah. So I think that that's part of my answer to your first question too.
Okay.
Um, so the way that I got started, my dad had gone into an art of shaving store. Did they have those in Canada?
They do not, but I'm well familiar. I
Yeah.
actually have had a really great head shave once in Vegas at the Art of Shaving. So,
Yeah. So maybe 10, 15 years ago, he wanders into a store, buys a nice razor and a brush and a bowl and whatever shaving cream that they were buying. Not because he was trying to make a hobby of it or anything, just thought it was kind of cool.
sure.
His dad used the same kind of razor and just thought it was an interesting thing to do. And I was having trouble. I worked at the time in an office. And so I shaved every day and I had trouble with ingrown hairs in my beard. And
Right.
he said, hey, I think you might like this type of razor better. It only has one blade. The blades are really cheap, but it doesn't cut beneath the skin. It doesn't cause as many ingrown hairs. And anybody that's listening to this podcast already knows all of that stuff. But I started using a double-edged safety razor and all of the problems that I had went away. So there was an element of I've kind of been scammed for my entire life buying these expensive razors. I think
Right.
that's how a lot of people get interested and get started.
Yep.
But then I started to realize that there's this entire like community. There's people who view these products almost as a piece of art, something that a human created and not just a toiletry. And they talk about it on Reddit in different chats and things like that. And that to me was like, anytime you stumble across something that's been there the entire time, but you didn't know about it, like if you're exploring your backyard as a kid and you find a cave, it's like,
Right.
holy crap, I'm going to tell all my friends and all that stuff. So I started a blog kind of for the same reason that you started this podcast.
Wow.
I'm
Okay.
just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to get a big following or anything like that, and I didn't, but did spend a little bit more time in the communities and everything. So that kind of coincided with my first product, which was a safety razor case that was modeled after a World War I safety razor case,
Right.
and things kind of snowballed after that.
Okay. Interesting. What year was that?
That would have been 2019.
Okay.
So it was kind of, people will ask if this is a COVID business, and it wasn't really because I got started before COVID.
Right.
But if COVID hadn't happened, this probably wouldn't have happened either because I had so much extra time to
Interesting.
devote to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So, thank goodness we had a pandemic. Not really, but otherwise, maybe there would be no Spearhead. Um, is there a story behind the revival of the Seaforth brand?
Maybe not a great story, but there's a story.
Okay. Because I mean, it's an old, sort of very, very classic, iconic brand.
Yeah, it really is kind of happenstance. I stumbled across it. I don't know how
Okay.
I stumbled across it. I was probably, I like old stuff. I like vintage stuff. And so I
Sure.
was probably just Googling vintage brands. And I came across one of the red and white bottles of Seaforth, probably from the 50s, maybe early 60s. And I did a little bit more digging into the brand and realized that it had a really cool story at the time. It was actually really popular at the time. If you went into a barber shop, it was either Old Spice or Seaforth.
Right.
And I was shocked that nobody had picked up the brand because the trademarks had expired, the copyrights had expired. It was basically there for the taking. And it wasn't my goal to start a brand, but you start thinking, could I?
Sure.
Could I actually do something with this? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, well, I've got nothing but time on my hands and this really cool brand that nobody is doing anything with,
Right.
and took the leap. And I'm glad I did because it's super rewarding.
That's great. I'm glad you did too, because I'm also, I mean, I work in advertising, so I'm very sensitive to the power of brands and sort of, growing and nurturing brands. So it's of great interest to me, at least, maybe some of our listeners as well. Shepherding a big sort of iconic brand like that can be a big responsibility. Is that something that was top of mind or even of mind when you were doing this, or not even a consideration? I mean, you said earlier it was a big brand. That and Old Spice were sort of two major men's grooming brands of days gone by.
Yeah, it was a consideration. I'm trying to think how much of a consideration it was at the time versus whether I just ran the business the way I would normally run a
Right.
business and it ended up being respectful. So I think about it now this way. I've put so much effort and time into the brand and I really care about it. I really care about the products that we make, that we're so far from a drop shipping operation.
Right.
Every single product I've made personally by hand. Sean and I have discussed the scent for it at length. It's something that I really put a lot of effort and thought into. And so I think about it in terms of, if I had to abandon this for whatever reason, if life got busy and
Yeah.
somebody else 50 years from now picked it up, I would very much appreciate it if they were respectful of the legacy. And for all I know, the guy that started the company, Alfred McKelvy, was a great guy. I haven't seen anything otherwise, right? If I would have found out that he was a shady business person or a philanderer or something unsavory,
Right.
then maybe I would have a little bit different of opinion, but I wouldn't have run the business any differently.
Okay.
But I know that he still has relatives that are alive. I got an email from one of them that said,
No
"Hey, I
kidding.
stumbled across this. I think it was a grandchild. And he said, I think this is really cool that you've revived the brand. You've done it in a respectful way. I really like the aesthetic of the packaging. It kind of keeps some of what my grandfather started. And so
Sure.
that made me happy that I did approach it in a way that was respectful of the legacy.
Right. That seems like a wonderful payoff, actually. And that's a great answer. I mean, did you know how much did you know about Seaforth prior to all of this?
Nothing until the day I found the bottle.
Really?
And then
Okay.
you go down the rabbit hole,
That's right.
and there's one website called Cosmetics and something. And if you look up Seaforth, it's one of the top results. And they did a really good job of putting together the timeline of the original brand and all of the different scents that came out over time.
Okay.
And then, so if you're looking at primary sources, there's really not a lot available except for the ads that they came out with. So really, the only thing that I had to go off of was that biography, that website, which seems pretty credible and everything has checked out. So whoever wrote that did a really good job researching it, and I don't know where they found the resources that they did, but it's a really well written article. And then you can kind of glean things from the different ads that came out and the context of when things came out.
Right.
Um, so I didn't know a lot about the brand except what I could find online.
Sure. But still, that's some good sort of forensic investigation almost.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's no biography of Alfred McKelvy,
Amazingly.
unfortunately.
And I mean, again, I know that I'm hypersensitive to brands, but it seems to me like you're doing a wonderful job perpetuating that lore and that sort of classic, iconic brand. The branding is very tight and it feels like there's a lot of thought and care put into it. So it shines through. So that's great. Keep it
I
going.
I hope so. I think the hardest thing was coming up with the first label for the first shaving soap
Right.
because there was a certain we probably have opposite skills. So I'm pretty good at coming up with kind of the fuzzy vision of what I want, but I can't envision what it actually physically looks like. And I'm
Okay.
guessing you're pretty good at the opposite. You're probably pretty good at taking a brief or an explanation and actually creating visually what that would look like. And
That's right.
so, what I wanted to do is come up with a brand aesthetic that was very clean and very classic and almost timeless. Because if I pick up one of the vintage Seaforth bottles, especially maybe not the very first bottles, those were a little bit kitschy. But if you look at the ones from like the 50s and early 60s, really well done. Everything is just very clean and classic and still relevant today because I'm still
Right.
borrowing a lot of that aesthetic. So I wanted to make sure to carry that forward and found a really good designer in Italy who was able to to take my vision and make exactly what I wanted because other people had attempted and come up with something that just did not hit the
Didn't
spot.
work. Right. Had to go all the way to Italy, but you know what they say about Italian design. It's
Yeah,
always,
beautiful.
yeah. If I can ask, what's your day job?
So I work for a German steel company.
Okay.
So I don't want to get too far in the weeds. It's kind of like if somebody asks what my hobby is, I'll say I make barbershop products because you can get into the weeds and nobody really cares. So I work for a German materials company. We make really high end steel for certain manufacturing applications.
Okay.
So a lot of my day job is not very creative at all. It's much more engineering focused, technology focused, specs and measurements and things like that. So um, it's one of the reasons I really like having Spearhead as a side gig
Sure.
because that gives me an kind of a creative outlet where I can do something a little more creative focused.
Absolutely. Sounds therefore like a good balance and that you can, pump all of your pent-up creative energy into all things Spearhead.
When I have the time.
Right.
And that's the big challenge because I
Of course.
travel a lot for work.
Ah,
and I have kids. It's like anybody else. I know you have kids, or at least
I have a kid, yeah,
a
and
kid, and
life
life gets busy. They have
does.
activities, they have things they need to do. So all of my work is confined to nights and weekends.
Okay,
And on the nights, if I'm in a different city, and on the weekends, if we have a competition or something, it gets
there
tough.
goes that. Yeah,
But
no,
I
I hear
think
it.
the one thing I would add to that is one of my biggest appreciations for the wet shaving community is they're so forgiving.
Right,
So if I don't, nobody's waiting with bated breath for me to come out with a new product. If I go 12 months without coming out with something, totally fine. If
sure.
I kind of ghost for a while and I'm not active and posting and interacting, nobody
It's
cares.
forgiven, yeah.
Everybody's very cool about understanding that everybody has lives and they have things that come up, and sometimes they don't have the same thrill that they did at one point in time, and maybe they
Point.
jump back in 6 months later, but everybody's very forgiving in that way.
Okay, that makes sense. And I mean, Spearhead made it all the way to the semifinals in the Reddit wet shaving March Madness competition. So, obviously it's a very well lauded, well liked, and respected brand. So, I guess that's good to have that status, which allows the leeway to, keep this as a side hustle.
It's the maybe the furthest I've ever made it in any sporting competition. So no, I love March Madness.
Sure, it was a lot of
For
fun, and they tweaked it this year, so that was nice too. More of a sudden death kind of organize it, or the way they organized it. So that was a lot of fun this year.
very much Royal Rumble style.
Yep, yep,
But no, I love it. I love it for the absurdity of it. I mean, it's people take it very seriously, but at the same time, it's all very tongue in cheek at the same time. It's
it
kind of
sure
a
is.
unique balance because people put a lot of time into these competitions. Maybe not March Madness, maybe lather games more so.
Certainly lather games, yes,
People
absolutely.
put a lot of time into that, but I think
Indeed.
everybody sometimes they take themselves seriously, but in instances like that, not too seriously.
Right.
You know,
Uh,
I remember last year when I had gotten some cameos. You know what cameo is, right? Where you get a
yes.
celebrity that I
Yeah.
had gotten some cameos, and trying to get them to say what I wanted them to say without explaining that this is a basketball themed wet shaving competition
Right.
that was a big challenge.
That is a challenge. That's funny. That actually, brings me to a question that I had for you. It's kind of a good segue. What's involved in putting together a creative brief for a perfumer like Sean Maher?
It's kind of evolved over time. The very first one, I really put a lot of time and effort into writing exactly what I was trying to accomplish, exactly the feel that I wanted people to get when they used the product. And a lot of that was twofold. One, he didn't know who the heck I was,
Right.
right? So I'm going to a perfumer who's very accomplished in his own right and saying, "Hey, I'm an unknown. I don't have a product yet. I want you to just take me at my word that I'm going to take this seriously and create some really good sense that'll take it to the next level."
Sure.
And so, of course, I had to do my homework to give some credibility, but at the same time, I'm sure you experience this too. If you have a really good brief and a really good vision of what somebody wants, it probably saves you a ton of time in creating the final product,
Absolutely. And even a lot of back and forth sort of guesswork too. So
right?
for sure, yes.
So the very first 2 cents, Spiced and Heather, I explained to him exactly the feel, exactly the demographic, what we were trying to accomplish, what I wanted people to envision when they smelled it.
Right.
And we had a lot of back and forth, and he created some phenomenal scents. It's gotten a lot easier since then because there's a lot that I don't have to explain. He
Sure.
understands the vibe I'm going for. He understands what I like and what I don't like.
Right.
Um, he knows that if he makes something uh, super sweet, I'm not going to like it, or if it's way too modern, I won't like it. And so we'll generally just talk about the scent in terms of what was Seaforth doing at the time? Why did they come out with this scent? What were they trying to accomplish, and what does that look like in a modern context, and how do we want it to smell?
So always sort of reverting back or being true to the original brand or brand essence almost.
Right. Maybe not the
Interesting.
notes.
No, not the
So
notes. It's a
like
reinterpretation of, I guess, modern
exactly.
day. Right.
Exactly. So something like Black Watch, what they were going for was they wanted to go up market. They sold their
Okay.
stuff in drugstores and
Yes.
they wanted to create a high-end department store
Ah,
product. And so that was the origin of Black Watch. So we focused a lot less on what the original notes were because the scent was not great. But we focused on, what would a very high-end version of our current product be that you might
yes.
go up market with?
Interesting.
And that's what became Black Watch.
And it allows you to sort of reinvent the wheel each time or sort of give it a modern day interpretation or, your input, Sean's input. That's great. Is there a whole back catalog, or I should ask, how many sort of Seaforth fragrances were there back in the day? Do you know?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but we're getting to the end of the road.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's only a couple left. There was a Dominican Bay rum,
Yeah.
which I've held off on doing that. I know Sean doesn't love bay rum to start with, and
Okay.
and bay rum is kind of divisive, right? So
Is.
I haven't made that one yet. There was a an English lime that do we really need two lime scents? I don't know. I'm sure we'll make it at some point in time.
I say yes, but, ultimately you'll decide.
I think so too,
I do like the lime
because
scents.
I love sea spice lime. It's one of my favorites,
Yeah.
but it's it's a really unique type of lime, and there are a lot of different directions that you can go. So I think that one will get made. And then the last one, it was called, uh, well, you speak French, épée, in fencing.
Oh yeah, épée. So like a spear or a sword, or I think it's
Exactly.
called an épée actually, but yes.
Epee, perfect. So the scent was called Epee. As
Interesting.
far as I can gather, it was the last thing that they made. So it was kind of their last hurrah.
Okay.
And realizing that I only have three or so cents left, that's how I'm viewing it too. This
Right.
is this is kind of the pinnacle and the climax. So I don't know when it'll be released. It might take a while, but it's something that Sean and I have already started talking about
That's fantastic.
making that kind of the pinnacle of the brand.
Cool. Neat. You hear that, listeners? Time to start getting hyped for whenever it comes out.
I'm sure it'll be good.
I'm sure it will too. In my opinion, all your stuff is real good. So, is it difficult to procure old or even to find old bottles of Seaforth fragrances and such?
It wasn't for me when I got them,
Okay.
but nobody knew or cared about the brand when I picked them up. So I could go on eBay and buy a full or nearly full vintage bottle of any Seaforth scent for $20 or
Wow.
something like that. Um, Now that we're kind of a reestablished brand, I see people trying to charge a lot more. I don't know if they actually
Interesting.
ever sell it or if they realize, hey, there's not that big of a market for it and
Right.
end up selling it for 20 or $30. But most of the stuff has not been difficult to find.
Okay. But still, the resale market, that's testament to a successful brand revival. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. The little mugs, the shaving mugs,
Yeah.
those are pretty easy to find, and a lot of those, especially what I would call the second generation ones, those are all still in really good shape. They're either ceramic or milk glass. I think they're actually milk glass, but they're screen printed and they've
Okay.
held up really well over time.
Yeah.
The ones before that, the very original from the 1940s and 1950s, they were all ceramic and they were done with a decal rather than screen printing with some sort of a varnish or lacquer over it.
Right.
So those don't hold up nearly as well. You get a lot of yellowing in that lacquer and the decal starts coming off. But there's still a lot of really good shape vintage Spearhead stuff on eBay.
Interesting. And do you have much of it or a collection of it?
I have I have pretty much everything that I've seen them advertise. I've got
Okay.
at least one of them. I had kind of a treasure trove. Somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, we were cleaning out my grandpa's apartment,
Right.
and he had all these boxes of Seaforth things." And all I can think is that he must have been a sales rep,
Okay.
or maybe he was a pharmacist or something and had a store that sold the things.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get pretty much everything. The one thing that I haven't found, and and I don't know if I want to find it, it was a bar of soap with a hole in the middle that was kind of their answer to soap on a rope. So
Okay.
you could hang it on your shower hook. And
Interesting.
yeah, that was a weird one. I don't think there's much
That's
of a market for that. Maybe there is. I don't know.
interesting concept, but I haven't seen that. I remember soap on a rope, but not soap with a hole, or I don't know, what do you call it? Donut soap, something.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Seaforth scent, just personally?
I think probably the one I use the most is probably Roman Spice, but my favorite is Black Watch.
Okay.
Just because I know what went into it and how many revisions we had and how many just back and forth of no, I don't think this is heading in the direction that I want it to. And then the next rendition is closer, but still not there. And kind of that iterative process, once you get to the very end of it and you settle on something that, man, I really love this.
Yeah.
It's like anything you put sweat equity into,
Oh,
you
makes
value a little bit more, you
of
know?
course, of course. Can I ask how many iterations, or is that trade secret?
No, it's not a trade secret. And I don't want to make it sound like it was 100 different iterations, but it
No,
was
no.
probably five.
Sure, but still,
That represents, so five iterations probably represents 9 months of work. I
okay.
mean, the things don't happen quickly. I have a life and a family. Sean
Of
has a
course.
life and a job and
Yeah,
maybe a family too. I don't know. But everybody's doing this on the side,
of course. So things
and
take
so
time.
everything takes a little bit longer than you would expect.
Absolutely, understandably. Yeah. Do you have a favorite razor?
I think probably my favorite. It's I don't use a Gillette Tech much anymore, but I think it's probably my favorite just because of the history and the simplicity of it. I think it's a fantastic razor. I like really mild razors.
Yeah,
So it fits the bill for exactly what I want. What I tend to use on a daily basis is the brass carve razor on the B plate,
sure.
and that it's a sweet spot for me. I like the weight of it and I
Yeah,
like the mildness of it. So I use that on a daily basis, but I think for the sake of history, simplicity, um, design that really changed an entire industry,
yes,
I think you have to look at the early Gillettes and put some value on that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I do like the Gillette vintage razors as well. Although I've moved on to straights these days because it's just more fun and dangerous, but it's the latest kick.
I can't do it. I've
No,
tried. Maybe I could. I take that back. I could do it if I devoted enough time to it.
that's it. It takes
Um,
some time.
but
Uh,
I'm not there.
okay. And I'm still, don't get me wrong, I'm just at the very beginning of my journey, so I'm still improving and refining technique, but having a lot of fun doing it.
Do you get as good of a shave or a better shave or almost as good? What's your experience?
It depends. To be perfectly honest, I think that I can right now in my journey get a better shave with a DE razor, a closer shave, because I'm less intimidated to sort of go harder, if you will. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
I still occasionally will cut myself or nick myself with the straights. So I haven't perfected. You see these guys, shaving on shaving videos with a straight razor, and it looks effortless, and it's the ultimate shave. It's a great close shave. Against the grain is still daunting to me in certain positions, but there's a lot to learn, just control of it all. So I think that these days I can get a much closer shave, intentionally so with a DE, although I'm working towards the opposite.
I just feel like the one that I have, it was professionally restored. I have no doubt that the guy who
Yeah.
restored it was very talented and capable, but I just feel like it's not anywhere as sharp as like a feather blade.
Right.
And maybe it's just my blade, or maybe that's just the nature of them that they will never be as sharp.
Oh,
But I feel like, yeah, I feel like it's just it takes much more effort for me.
yeah, I would agree. I mean, overall, it's more effort. I like the fact that it is. I hone my own. So sorry. I hone my own. And that is a lot of fun for me. That's part of the thrill. Just sort of getting an old junky razor on eBay and bringing it back to a clean or as clean as possible, shavable implement.
Do you sharpen your own kitchen knives also?
I never did, but now I'll start. I haven't yet because they're still all sharp, but as soon as they dull, I will do that. And I recently bought my partner one of these fancy Japanese chef knives. It's at her place, so I don't dare sharpen that, and it comes with one free sharpening. So once we're past that, we'll see. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd like to sharpen. I'm going on a total tangent here, but
it's fine.
I think I think they're related skills, right? If you're into shaving and you hone your own razors, it's logical that
Absolutely.
you would do your own knives. And so I've been interested. I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. It's like anything else. You start wet shaving, and now all of a sudden you're $500 deep in
Well,
equipment,
this is
and
it.
and so buying the stones and everything like that, do I really want to drop another $300 on something that I might abandon in a couple of months?
That's a
So,
very good point. And then, beyond that, it's quite nuanced. Then you get into the Japanese natural stones, which are extremely pricey. And then, you collect straight razor. It's endless. It's an endless hole. Even, people that come into wet shaving to say, "Oh, I'm going to save money." Certainly the people that we hang out with, it's laughable because we're all, hobbyists and collectors, quite frankly.
yep.
Stamped metal razor coming from Seaforth or from Spearhead rather anytime soon.
You did your research.
I did.
I don't even remember where or when I would have talked about that. I didn't know that that was an idea that got out in the wild.
Uh-huh. I was, I guess, easy enough for me to find. I don't have my source written down, so I can't say exactly, but is that something you'd like to do in the future?
It's not going to happen. It's something I
Okay.
really wanted to do because I work related to the metal stamping industry. And so I see how things are made
Right.
and realize that this is not a super complicated thing to make. And the thing I like about the original stamped Gillette Techs is you could crank those things out for pennies, maybe less than pennies back then. It's a really simple design. It's not difficult to make, but the startup costs are really high. So
Right.
making a progressive die just to stamp the base plate would have cost maybe $50,000.
Wow.
I could have done it. I could have done it overseas for much less, but I didn't really have an interest in that. My entire day job career revolves around American manufacturing. And so if I made it here, I wanted it to be made in the way that Gillette was originally making them, just
Sure.
like the khaki sets that we made. And so there was a period of time where I was looking closely at whether that was a feasible, viable thing to do. And yes, you could, but I'd have to sell a lot of razors. And I just don't think there's enough people on our wet shaving
No,
to
to buy all those razors.
to
Right.
buy all those razors when you can buy a tech for $10.
Sure. And they're still very popular. And as you said earlier, still great shavers. So
Right.
I understand.
So when you look at the sacrifices and everything and you start to say, well, the only way for me to make this viable is to use a zinc alloy and, or something that's not true to the original.
Yeah.
And then you have to ask why, because there's tons of cheap zinc alloy razors out there. What can I do that's any better than what's on Amazon? And the answer is
Right.
nothing.
That's
So
it.
So
Yeah.
no, as much as I would love to do that, that's something that's relegated to the idea book.
Fair enough. I just saw, in fact, I think it's Razor Rock just released, what do they call it? The Goat, which is a copy of the Mercure 34C,
Okay.
but in stainless steel. So also another classic razor,
Oh,
but
that's
they
cool.
released it in stainless. We'll see. So far, so good from what I've read on Reddit. People, sort of ordered it right away, and the reviews are good. But, a mild razor. Um,
How do you feel about cloning something? Because I look at it and I'm not wild.
yeah,
So
I
the
don't love
razor
it.
case, the razor case that I made,
Yeah.
somebody and I know who it was. He bought a couple from me. He owns a shaving company. We had a good conversation. about the history of it and everything. And I was thinking, man, I hope he doesn't send these off to China to get cloned. Sure enough, exactly what he
Exactly
did
what he
is he
did.
sent them
Yeah.
off to China and get cloned. And I thought, I'm a one man show who put a ton of time and cost into this thing, and it was a personal insult for him to clone it. But at the same time, I'm cloning somebody else's design. The only difference is they made it a century ago.
Well,
So
but
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on
you
that.
know, first off, I'll say, are you really cloning somebody else's design? It's you've revived a brand and you're being true to it. So, there was already a blueprint in place, perhaps, and you're just following it very nicely. And again, like what I said earlier, Seaforth seems like this huge, old, iconic, massive brand, and that feeling is still there all of these years later. And, maybe that's through you being true to, I guess the fidelity of what the brand might have been. Cloning a straight up copy and doing so on the cheap to just sell lots of and make money, I don't love. Certainly, in my world in advertising, you have to be very, very careful with copyright. And, many people can arrive at the same idea, but if you execute it in exactly the same way, it's problematic. And, intellectual property, it's nice when it's respected in any case, especially if you've put something out in this world and people just blatantly copy it. Flattery, there's the flattery aspect. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but there are limits to that. So that's what I would have to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there has to be a healthy balance between if you don't reward innovation, nobody will innovate. And then we're
Right.
just stuck with the stuff we have today.
That's it.
And so when, when a really good company like um, Timeless or Blackland or somebody comes out with a razor, I think personally it's really important for the community to reward that and to shun any copies because yes, somebody will clone it and somebody will come up with something and sell it on AliExpress for
Right.
a third
Much
of the
less.
price.
Yes,
But why would anybody put all that time into development? If we want new things, we have to reward the people who are creating new things.
I
So
agree.
there has to be a healthy balance. I think there's a difference between copying something that was made a century ago and copying something that was made 3 years ago and is still in production.
Absolutely. But still in production being the key word, right? Even if it was made a century ago, if it was still a very successful, long, old standing brand that was alive, that's a different story. So, Dennis, you have thoughtful swag, in my opinion, at least. Um, some interesting stuff too. Is there a story behind the Shave Journal?
Yeah, I'm looking at on my desk here
Oh,
a field notes notebook.
yes.
Do you use field notes?
I don't. I use moleskins,
Oh yeah.
which is a little bit more bougie, I think. But that, in advertising, you need. I always have a notepad with me.
Yes,
So
this is the pedestrian version
yes,
of a moleskin notebook, and so I'm a sucker for vintage things and very practical things, and never used field notes notebooks until a few years ago, and then realized such a such a simple little notebook. It fits in my pocket. I don't need to take extensive notes in my day to day work. I just need to write down a couple of things,
right.
and really liked field notes. And so I start looking at the history of those and see that those go back to agricultural notebooks that a lot of the farm supply companies would give out to farmers, and they would always keep it in their pocket. And I bought a whole trove of vintage agricultural notebooks, and I can see like the one guy is a vintner, and it talks about the grapes that he grew versus the grapes that he bought and what different varieties he was making and everything. And it's just a really cool glimpse of the past,
Sure.
like going to the flea market and finding vintage photos and trying to make up the story in your head of who was this person and what did
Yeah.
they do. And I just liked the idea of a little notebook, and I thought that for shaving, I see people putting in their shave of the day
Yep.
in different places, but we're kind of an analog mindset of people, right? um, uh, we use old things, old razors, analog style things. And I thought, well, maybe people would be interested in a little notebook that's got some cool artwork that they
Yeah.
could write their shaves in.
Absolutely.
The answer to that question is no. People are not
They're
interested
not.
in
That's
a little notebook. No.
surprising.
But that's okay
Yeah.
because it was something fun to do. Didn't cost a ton of money. Maybe I spent $1,000 getting these things made
Yeah.
and sold some of them. I probably didn't recoup my investment. But so much of what we do, like what you're doing now with the podcast and what I do with the things that I make, a lot of times it's just about trying something and having fun with it, knowing that
Right.
I'm still going to be able to pay the mortgage if it doesn't work out.
That's
Sometimes it's just fun. So a lot of what I sell is something that I saw in a vintage context and really liked it and wanted to adapt it for my brand or bring it back
right.
for my brand.
That would certainly speak to the combs and the beard brushes that you recently released because it
Yeah,
has that.
the combs are super cool. They're
You
really
know,
nice. If anybody hasn't seen them, it's a tortoiseshell comb that's made from cellulose acetate, which is a plant-based plastic. And you
okay.
think, okay, plant-based plastics, this is a modern thing, like a green thing. And it's like, no, in the 1940s, if you went to a barber shop, there's a really good chance he was using a comb that was made out of cellulose acetate.
Sure.
It's an old technology, not a new one.
Okay.
And and back then you would hand saw in the teeth and then hand polish the comb.
Right.
And just a really cool way of making an old school product. I really like those combs.
Yeah. They certainly look great. I wish I had hair to actually use one, but alas, I can only admire them. Is Polly Pocket still a Spearhead employee?
Polly is my dog, for
Okay.
those that don't know. I love Polly. Polly's the sweetest dog on the face of the planet. But have you ever heard a parent tell their kid, I always love you, but I don't always like you?
No, although many parents probably think that.
Yeah, it's something that
Well,
we all think. And I heard
yeah,
somebody say it out loud, and it's like, oh, wow, there's some truth to that, actually.
there
I
is.
think any parent can relate. And that is Polly. Right now, my wife is upstairs recovering from shoulder surgery
Oh,
because when we first got Polly, we were taking her, my wife was taking her for a walk and she saw a squirrel or a rabbit and took off and did some damage to my wife's
oh,
shoulder. So
boy.
those are the things you go through when you're a pet owner, but
Sure.
she's still around. She's still our mascot and we still love her.
Fantastic. So then she's still a Spearhead employee.
She's still a Spearhead employee.
Very good.
She eats the tallow.
Right. Yeah, you need someone to test the tallow. Better than forcing the kids, I guess. Do you think Spearhead will ever make non-Seaforth soaps?
Yeah, probably. If we're still doing our thing 10 years from now,
Okay.
probably.
And as you said,
Um,
you're coming to an end of their catalog or their existing catalog.
Right, exactly. And that gives us a couple options. We could come up with new scents,
Sure.
which is totally on the table. There's nothing to keep us from doing that
Yep.
and preserving the same vibe. One of the things that we've talked about is reimagining the reimagined scent. So Heather, spiced. Do we start the cycle all over again and reimagine it? There's nothing to keep us from doing that.
Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, there's a possibility that we would make something non Seaforth. Seaforth is definitely that is our brand.
Yep.
The Spearhead name is only here because we started it before I knew Seaforth existed. You
Okay.
know, if I had started with Seaforth, it would probably be our brand.
Right.
But I do like having the flexibility to create a different sub brand and
Yes.
still have it under the same company, the same LLC.
Absolutely. Makes sense. How long did it take you to develop your current soap base?
It felt like forever. I don't know how long it was. Maybe it was 6 months,
Okay.
but it felt like forever. Maybe it was even less. I don't know. But I was really dedicated to it. I mean, every night after work, I was going into the workshop and getting out the crock pots and making
Oh,
small
wow.
batches of
Okay.
different recipes. It was really intense for a period of time and a lot of frustration, a lot of failures. I wasn't getting what I wanted, and we eventually got there. But it was a much more difficult process than creating the first recipe.
Interesting. And what version would you say that is then? Like, do you go by versions
Um,
or recipe? I mean, the first one was the first one.
yeah, the first one I went through 20-ish versions.
Okay.
The second one was probably 20 more.
Wow. Okay. Lots of hard work to get there,
Yeah.
but it's a great base, and it's again well lauded. I think people really seem to enjoy it, at least in the spheres where I orbit.
I hope so. I like it and I make things that I like myself. And it's
Yeah.
always rewarding when other people like it too.
Sure.
But um, talking with a musician friend of mine
Yes.
recently and saying one of the biggest things I've realized from this whole process is realizing that I do what I do for me mostly. And it's really a bonus that other people enjoy it.
Yeah.
But even if I wasn't selling a lot, I'd probably still be making
Still
stuff
doing
because
it.
I
That's
enjoy
great.
doing it. And maybe you're the same way with some of the art that you make.
Indeed, indeed. And I think that when the love and the passion is there, it really shows in the work, whether other people like it or not, you know.
Right.
But to me, it shows through. Does your buddy Scott still come over to help you make soap?
He's coming over tonight.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, he's the best free help I've ever gotten. He resents the fact that for 5 years he's been helping me make things and has never made a penny off of it. So
Right. Well, big shout out to Scott then on this podcast that
yeah, thank you,
also
Scott.
doesn't make a penny, but maybe one day we'll all be famous. Who
Yep.
knows? You mentioned a musician friend. I guess that's uh, why the question is why is music education so important to you? And I know this only because you did that collaboration with HD Shaves, the musician, and released that jazz album as a celebration of an anniversary. Spearhead.
Yeah. So the context behind that, and I realize we're probably getting pretty long, and I don't know if anybody is still listening, but I'll give kind of a little bit of the backstory to that. We've done a number. We've done 4 or 5 fundraisers that
Okay.
benefit a music nonprofit. Essentially, it's a nonprofit that supports, I guess you would call it marching band or marching arts, but that's kind of evolved from what you think of marching band to be.
Right.
Um, but I was in the program. It's a local program. I was in the program when I was in high school, and now my child is in it. And it's a really well run program, but it's really expensive to run.
Sure.
And we don't live in a wealthy community. We're not a poor community. We're everything about this region is very average. And so you have people who can afford things and people who can't afford things.
Right.
And the entire mission of the organization is, we don't care who you are, what your abilities are, what your financial means are. It doesn't matter if you have any musical aptitude or if you've ever even played an instrument. We want to give you an opportunity to learn and grow because it's important for your brain. It's important to get physical activity. It's important to get social interaction. So that's the mission, and it's one that I support strongly.
Yeah.
And and I think I've learned as I've gotten older, I didn't care when I was a kid about the music itself. I was just hanging out with my friends.
Okay.
But as I get older, I realize there is something happening in your brain when you're doing something musical that we don't really understand, but it's really powerful.
Right.
Um, People who have a stutter, if they sing, the stutter goes away. Somebody has a palsy and they pick up a guitar, and all of a sudden,
It's
maybe
gone.
palsy is not the right word, a tremor, it's
Yeah.
gone. Like there are amazing things happening, and I have a friend who's a music therapist, and she'll tell me things that just absolutely blows my mind. So now, as an adult, I look at it and say, I was doing it to kill time and hang out with my friends, but these kids are actually making their brains stronger by
Sure.
going through this.
Yeah.
And knowing that we're a community where not everybody can afford the fee, we've paid for 10 kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it
That's
to go
fantastic.
through a year's worth of the program, which
Yeah.
I'm really proud of.
Sure. You should be. That's wonderful. And it's very important. I agree. Music. Both my son and I are drummers, so
Nice.
appreciate that. Absolutely. Here's a recurring question, but I've tweaked it a little bit moving forward. And the question is, would you buy another man's used soap? Used to be smell another man's used soap, but that was weird. And,
Yeah. So when I first started, it was I would never use a used razor. And
right.
then that progressed to, okay, I can take a razor and really sanitize it. So it's not that weird. I can do that. And then that progressed to I kind of want to try the soap, but I don't want to pay all the money for it, and I can get it in a cheap box of stuff. So maybe I'll just scrub the hell out of it and get every remnant. So yes, I have, and I would, and it's yeah, it's weird, but it's practical.
No, that's bang on the money, I think. Are chili and peanut butter sandwiches really a thing?
It's not a thing in Canada.
No, or not here at least. I mean,
It's probably not a thing anywhere outside of Ohio. Yes, it's a thing. It's
it's
delicious. It was
really
served in our high school cafeteria.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Can you break like chili paste and peanut butter? How does that
Oh
work?
no, like chili with beans and ground beef,
Oh, oh,
like a bowl of chili in the
oh, a
wintertime.
bowl of chili with peanut. Okay.
Yeah, so you have a peanut butter sandwich,
Yeah, yeah. Slop some
and
chili on.
you dip your peanut butter sandwich in the bowl of chili.
Oh, okay.
And traditionally, so I'm relatively close to Cincinnati. Cincinnati chili is a totally different animal.
Yeah.
What we would serve is more traditional chili with beans. Yeah, it's
Interesting.
fantastic. You should try it.
Interesting. I will do.
The flavors go well
It's
together.
funny. Years ago, I dated a girl from Solon, Ohio,
Oh yeah.
but she never introduced me to that. I'll have to try it.
No, different culture up there
Is it?
in
Yeah.
Northeast Ohio. This
Okay.
may be more of an Appalachian thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I'm always up to trying new things, and that sounds, I like all the elements, so why not all together?
Yeah, give it a shot. Let me know.
I mean, we have poutine, which is equally weird, but has become, a bit more ubiquitous, I guess. Moving
Equally
right
good.
along. Spearhead recently released a beard balm. How is that different to others on the market? And I see that you sport a beard. Do you use it for yourself?
I do use it.
Okay.
I used it before I started selling it.
Yeah.
So it's an oil, not a balm.
Ah,
So there's no thickeners, there's no stearic acid or anything to make it cream like. It's just straight up oil in a dropper bottle.
I see.
And so the whole idea for people who don't have beards, the whole idea of a beard oil, it's really not for the beard itself, although it does help the beard look better. But the idea is to get it down to the skin
It's right.
to keep your skin healthy. Um, the problem that I think the reason I didn't like a lot of beard oils is they're thick. Some of them they'll use castor oil or mineral oil or something, and that's too thick. And sometimes you'll see a guy where it's almost glistening like tinsel on a Christmas tree, and I don't like that look. I wanted
Right.
something matte, and I had a bottle of it's called MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. People put it in the bulletproof coffee, and I
Okay.
started using that on my beard. It's super thin, super lightweight, and I just liked it a lot better than any commercial beard oil that I bought. And it's what I use, and it's the primary base of the beard oil that I make.
Okay. Interesting. But I get the sense, from all that we've talked about, that it's all, certainly everything with Spearhead is stuff that you want for you and you believe in and you use. And that's the best promotion and advertising for something, I think.
So far,
Yeah.
I have the luxury of not having to deviate from that. If I had a payroll to make, if cash flow were my biggest
Different story.
challenge,
Yeah.
and I had to say, okay, what's our quarterly release? What's the new product we're coming out with? That's a different animal. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
If somebody wants to make a full time job out of this, that's awesome. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I just have the luxury of not having to do that. I
Right.
can work on my own schedule, come out with things that I really like and really enjoy. And hopefully people like them also. I hope people like the beard oil. I think they will. I think pre-shave oil is underrated in the wet shaving community. That's something that might be
Interesting.
divisive. I think there are a lot of traditionalists that would say it's silly to put oil on your skin first. I think it is supremely logical because soap strips oil. That's what it does.
Right.
And I would rather it strip the extra oil I put on there than the oil that's on my face.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense, especially for those that, my skin often gets very dry. So that makes sense. Well, there you go.
Yeah, well, if we didn't tariff the hell out of anything crossing the border, I'd send you a bottle.
Thank you. It'll wait. It can wait. And, once in a while I pop down to the States. I was just in New York, in fact, but not going to Maggard's meetup this year, unfortunately. Last question. Any future plans for Spearhead that we should know about?
Um, the the thing that will be coming up, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, it's really my daughter's venture rather than mine. She's
Oh,
been telling me for years I need to come out with Sheaforth, a female version, and I said no. I don't know how I would create a new market for female stuff in the products that I know how to make.
right.
Shaving soap, I might be able to find a tiny market. But her point was the strength in your product is that they smell good.
Yes.
You know, it's a good product. Otherwise, the shaving soap is nice, the aftershave is nice, and everything. But everything smells really nice. And I think you're. This is pretty wise for a 15-year-old. She says, I think you're selling yourself short by not coming out with something a little more feminine focused. And so she said, why don't for Mother's Day this year, why don't we come out with the Sheaforth scent? And I said, okay, if we limit it to just a perfume or something like that and don't have to print up millions of labels for different side products,
Right.
that's viable. We can do that. And so we're working on that now. It's finalized. I have the fragrance oil, I have the bottles, just waiting on label design, and we'll be good to go. Hopefully, the four people who are still listening at this point, if you don't have Mother's Day plans, you can hold out and buy some Sheaforth perfume.
Fantastic. Hopefully more than four, but yes, buy that Seaforth perfume. That's exciting. And
There were more than four at the 15-minute mark. At the 60-minute mark, I'm not so convinced.
people love this podcast. What do you mean? Come on now.
Oh, it's not you. They
It's
love
not,
you.
well,
They're
it's not
sick
you
of my
either.
voice by
I
now.
only have quality guests. I do a lot of spend a lot of time and research to get the top tier on my podcast.
You did, and I appreciate that. You did your homework.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you and your time talking to me today. So thanks so much, and everyone, spearhead.com. Check out the goods.
Spearheadshaving.com.
I'm sorry, spearheadshaving.com.
Yeah. All
Go
right.
there,
Hey, thank you.
go there now.
This was a lot of fun. I really do appreciate it. You broke up my afternoon, and
Perfect.
who doesn't like talking about themselves?
That's the point. I'm glad you were able to do so. I'm also glad that your office equipment is seems up to scratch. So you're welcome for giving it its test run.
All right. Well, have a good night. Thanks to everybody that listened.
Yes, same sentiment here, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Dennis.